We're first podcast of the new year.
Is that caffeine?
These are not the drones you're looking for. So we're back with, like I said, first of the year. Definitely been a bit on and off,
Yeah.
but that's okay. What are we going to talk about today?
I don't know.
Well, why have we been off? Well, you want to just quickly, maybe.
Sure. I mean, there were the holidays.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big one. And
Yeah.
both Christmas and New Year's, we try to record on Wednesdays. That's when those happen. You were sick.
Very sick.
A lot of weak genes in this house. You and the kids got sick.
Right.
I did not.
No.
I will say, I also didn't deviate much from the protocol.
From the nutrition protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just were out in San Diego.
Yeah.
And I think last week we thought about it, but I was also covering a couple of coaches at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So coaching a lot of classes, and it was like one of those things where we could squeeze it in, but it really wasn't ideal. And we prioritized my mental health over fitting a podcast in. And I think, like we said before, I'm good at getting everything done. It's not always like the best thing. So I appreciated that last week when we were going to get back to it, we kind of said, let's wait one more week. And
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually relates to this podcast.
It's all the way.
The Gain?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the Gain album?
Yeah. No, that's the wrong one.
I think it definitely relates to what we're going to talk about today with kind of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the holidays came, sickness, busy, blah, 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 blah. Yep, everyone kind of has those elements.
Mm-hmm.
Those are inescapable characters in our story, but we still do get to write how they relate to one another.
Right.
And I think one of the things with this stuff, especially when we look at like personal development or mindset or whatever, there generally is an internal approach and an internal focus.
Mm-hmm.
How you're going to respond, how you control yourself, blah, blah, blah. And I often think that it falsely gives people a sense that they're in 100% control. And like, I can do it because I think it. And, you know, you don't have nearly as much control as you might think you do, even though we might feel like we do have a good amount of control in our lives. Does that make sense?
I feel like you kind of jumped right into like the deep end. I'm losing it a little bit. So
Keep up, Campbell.
What we're talking about today is like the story you tell yourself.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is those elements.
Mm-hmm. Things like your schedule.
The holidays, if you become sick, if something happens
external
at work.
factors.
Yeah, those are all characters in your story.
Right. You can't control if you get sick or not, necessarily. I mean, or if someone at work says...
Yeah, if someone at work is... So, for example, we had two coaches who coach a lot, Santi and Lucas, have major life things, vacation, honeymoon.
Right. Right. I couldn't do anything about the fact that I had to cover those 20 classes last week.
But that's an external thing.
Sure, got it.
The
how
holidays.
I respond.
Right, how that weaves into your story and how you write your story.
Got it.
Is going to be then where we can say, okay, yes, now we can look at the internal and we can get that control. But that's part of the balance of life between the internal and the external, between what we can control and what we cannot control. The duality there is very, very important as we move through and as we write the story. So we kind of want to think about, we want to think about that, obviously.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about today is not just about those external things that you can't control, but many of the things that, the story that gets told about other things like that you create that is completely internal, that has nothing to do with external things.
No.
Right. Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay.
We're going to talk about that. I'm going to apologize in advance for maybe the rust factor that's in here. But
Well,
nonetheless.
I think it's not. I think it's sure.
Well, we're
Of
talking
course
about two
it's-
different things.
No, I think there's an element of it that's like it's sort of an abstract concept. So not without like tangible things, like then it's a little hard to wrap your head around.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of today is kind of like the story that you tell yourself.
Yeah.
In many
exactly.
ways. So for us, the concrete thing was, I think last week was sort of a challenge. So last week, actually, when you were sick, this is a great example, and the kids were sick, I definitely fell into a little bit of like the story I chose to make it,
Can't talk more.
even though I couldn't control that you got sick. I couldn't control those things, that it was actually the holidays. I kind of took that story and made it like a little bit like a victim story.
Right.
That's how I chose to weave that. Conversely, and that didn't really work out very well. I felt like that was not a pleasant experience for anyone. You were sick. I was kind of pissed off that you were sick.
Yeah, you are.
That was the story. The story was I'm angry because Bill
Is in fact human.
Well, I mean, we could talk about some of the factors that got you sick, but we won't.
Right. Sure.
Last week had some external things. You were going away. I was covering a lot of classes, and I decided not to have another story be a victim story.
Yeah.
And so the way that I wove that into my story was more like it was an opportunity. It was a chance to, whatever, impact members. I got the chance to like make those things positive. And it was a much better experience for me. I had an enjoyable week. So just interesting how you do that is an impact.
What was something you did that was helpful in writing a story that was serving both you and the others that you were interacting with that was different?
Sure, and I guess that probably ties into the other part that we were going to kind of talk about in this. And I guess it goes back to one of our other podcasts, which was about, I'm like drawing a blank on the word, probably for a good reason. Not regimented.
Discipline? Oh my God.
Are you saying, oh my God, because I'm going there? Because I couldn't remember the word.
Doesn't matter.
So I think what helped me write that story, obviously one was awareness, like the emotions of being angry and pissed off and annoyed aren't pleasant ones to be in. Those aren't like enjoyable emotions. So I was like aware that I would like to not experience those things.
Sure.
I was in charge of that. But then the other part was being very aware of what I was doing with my week, not having it be just all about discipline, all about checking the boxes, really having to move through each day, finding the right balance. And I think that leads into the other story. So for me, that meant like I couldn't do hard, crazy workouts every day. Because there was a lot of energy being spent on other things. And so the balance for me in that particular week was I probably needed more on the other side. Nice and easy, kind of going slow. But the story that I had to accept and not listen to, or the story that I had to not listen to, I guess, was, oh, you suck because like now you're not even doing a hard workout, and what does that mean? And if you don't go hard, you're not getting fitter. Like there was a lot of that I definitely had to not buy into.
So it sounds like there was one story being written that was very critical, judgmental, maybe mindless as well, as you're gonna do your training or you're gonna push your workouts and forget about going into the discipline or the punishment or the you're not training for anything really.
Do what you've always done. Don't change anything. Have
right.
It be
this is where we're going.
Keep on the plan.
This is where we're going.
Right.
Full steam ahead. I don't care what's in my way.
Yeah.
And when your actions are fixed, in an environment that's very, very dynamic, yeah, that's
Yeah, that's been my problem.
That's
too,
that. Yeah,
personally.
sure.
For everybody, but that's something I've typically fallen victim
That's
to.
a pattern that you've expressed. Yeah. On the flip side, though, if you're just a windsock and your environment dictates everything that you do, what? Why are you smiling at me?
Because that's kind of you.
How dare you? You're gonna get booted off of your former co-host.
I'm trying.
If your environment dictates everything you do, and you're not rooted or grounded in quote your story as well, then that's like the other end of the end of the
And I
spectrum.
am kind of kidding, but I'm not in a way. Like Santi, one of our coaches, right, the other week, said something about when we come into the gym, you and I, if there's a class that ends at 10, and let's say we have an hour to work out.
Okay.
I am very much like, I get to work. And he said, I'm like one of those horses with the blinders on. You struggle with that. You are the windsock in that environment. Right? Now, there's probably somewhere in between. But it's funny that we're both a little bit different in that. We're both a little bit on either end of the spectrum.
So you're saying I'm personable and nice and social, and you're just rude. All right. So anyway.
But yes, that.
But
that
nonetheless, it sounds like there was a story that was presented, maybe a rough draft of a story. That was, I'm going to do this, and like that was the premise of the story. You are going to do this, but then you didn't do that. So the rough draft that was being written was like, well, this is the story of what you didn't do, and of judgment and of whatever else kind of resentment, because of it. So that was still there, but your actions would ink that and make it be like the final draft, so to speak. If you were just like, nope, the story of I'm going to do this, head down and blow through.
Get put out,
And so that's good that you had the awareness of that, but like the actions also then fill in, like ink the story as well.
Right. And I didn't, so my actions were not that rough draft. I chose to do something different.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I think that whole topic of the story is what we've been saying is people have a lot of, like, and I think the reason we're saying a story, just to kind of give that, because a story is fiction. Like when you think about a story, like I'm going to tell you a story. When you tell little kids, it's usually like a fictional tale.
I don't tell fake stories.
It's a tale, right? So the reality of like people telling themselves stories, it's not necessarily real. It's not grounded in reality. It's something you've made up. So that said, when we struggle with people, maybe when we look at fitness, pulling back on a workout, hey, today I just want you to go really easy. They have a made-up story they've told themselves maybe for 5, 10, 15 years. If I don't go as hard as I possibly can, I will not get fit. It means that I'm a quitter. It means that I'm weak. That story is made up.
Correct.
But they, but just like little kids, you tell them a story, they might believe it. After a while, they start to believe it more and more and more. So that's like becomes very much part of that person. And I think that's where it's a really big challenge to have people start to like identify that and realize what is actual reality, what's fact, what's science, and what's made up in their head that they've just believed.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into that. Because there's the whole thing of your perception creates your reality, which there was a story that I won't get into about probably 10 years ago at this point, where so-and-so told me that perception is reality. And I was like, no, but you're wrong though. But your perception is wrong from what I know the reality to be. So I've always kind of had like not so great of a relationship with that, but nonetheless, like if you perceive something to be this, then that's going to be, kind of your reality. So obviously there's that. So there's that to contend with, your perception. Then there's like the other pressures of what you expect out of yourself, what you think others expect out of you. And that goes into character development of whatever kind of your story is going to be. So like, there's a lot that kind of goes into our development of our story. And I think if we look at how often do we really take ownership and take hold and action ourselves as a character, if we build out and we develop other characters in our life, either people or situations or influences or settings or whatever, you know, it's kind of like, it might make you stop and think for a second, like, oh yeah,
in other words, like, what am I kind of making up? Like, we had a friend recently that we reconnected with, and, you know, it was interesting because we hadn't talked in a long time, and he was nervous about reaching out because what would that seem like, and like, even in those situations, we kind of make up for other people, and we all do it all the time. It was just, I remember it because we talked afterwards about like the stories we make up, even with us. Like yesterday when you came home from being in, you know, beautiful San Diego, making up those stories like you're going to be disappointed to come back to New Jersey.
right.
It is not beautiful and San Diego.
No.
Now, that kind of goes back to some of our stuff about, you know, projection and stuff, but it can be really, you can weave an entire web of things that aren't based in reality about other people. And I think one of the ways to start to make those changes or cultivate awareness is to be honest or ask people or have interactions where you are, you know, trying to find the real truth, not just continue down your path of fiction.
Right. I mean, and this is the title of a book I have that is, I love it, Joe Didon, who talks about journaling, Joan, sorry, as a form of getting to know yourself,
right,
or checking in with yourself or whatever. And she's got a book, and it's all fictional, or I don't know what her genre is, a mix between fiction, nonfiction, just whatever, stories. The title of it is We Tell Ourselves Stories to Live. And I'm like, damn, that's a cool, like, and it's so true. Sure. I think, what's his face in Sapien, right? I was talking about Dag, my dad that for Christmas, and he was saying that essentially the dude posits that we have this imagined reality. I haven't read the book yet. And that kind of has driven action. So, you know, this notion of like stories as a way to just sort of, I think, also conceptualize and understand. Like, for example, my story had, for my entire life, had been the warrior. That was it. That was the character that I was. I assumed that, and I wanted it, and everything I did was under the thing of what would a warrior do. And this is from very, very young, all the way up until...
Do you think that story was at any time had any negative impact on you?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yes. I think... So I think negative impact is negative, a bit on the judgment side, and I guess
maybe restricted you. Did that story restrict you in some ways?
Yes, there are certain things a warrior does that someone else doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
There's a way of thinking. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like that was the character. I was that character in my story, kind of deal. So for people to look at themselves or their life and just, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, you know, some novelist and whatever. You don't have to have it figured out. There's no beginning, middle, end. It's just, if you were to think about, all right, like, if my life is a story right now.
Right. Who am I? What's the character?
Yeah, who am I? What is the character? And being curious with it, not yet, like, who do you want it to be? Because that's something that's a whole different set, but like currently, because that's the awareness element. Right. So, you know, you had that of, okay, I'm being the victim right now.
Right. Yeah.
So then that was that.
Right. And I think that exercise in itself, then that's like step one. And then when you look at, and I guess I always feel like I do try to bring it back to fitness. I guess maybe that's because it is important to me. It's also because I own a gym. It is what I feel very passionately about. That is a lot of what we talk about, movement as a form of like connecting with yourself. So And I do think it's helpful to have tangible things for people. Sometimes talking in ethereal things is hard for people to conceptualize. So,
Okay.
and that's really how this started
Yeah.
when we were talking about this
Yeah.
in the car.
Yeah.
That one of the things I think we're experiencing, you know, as we've evolved the gym, and we're now saying to people the facts, what is the science. So we're presenting something that is actually factual. It's not a fictional story. It is fact about, let's say, intensity and like the nervous system and all of that. And we're saying the fact is, if you go crazy and try to kill yourself every day, you will not only get fitter, you will burn out.
You will not.
You will not only, you will not just not get fitter.
Right.
You will not decrease your fitness only. You will also get burned out. You will also potentially stress yourself out. Like, there's all these things. That is the fact. That is science. That's not our opinion.
No.
That's not what we know about it.
However, there's another story.
Right.
There's
However,
another
we're that's what we're saying. What's equally as powerful, and if not more, is each of the people that's hearing what we're saying, the story that they have, the character they are, and there's a conflict with that. So if nobody had a story that they'd been telling themselves and they didn't have any association with what fitness was for them, and we're using fitness as an example, we would tell people this, and one would think, everyone would say, like, wow, of course, I'm here to get fit. Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
We know that's not been our experience.
Right.
Now, slowly, people, it is a process.
Yes.
But what happens, and what happened especially initially when we introduced this stuff, wasn't, this is science, this is fact, got it, I'm on it. It was a battle, I think, for people to, and I'm talking with myself included, to come to terms with, wait a second, like, I know this is fact, I comprehend what you're saying, but it's really putting into question the story that I've been working on for years.
Yeah.
I'm like deep in the story for years. It's how I live my life. It's this character I am, and it's questioning all that. It's basically taking that story and just saying, like, this is not bullshit, but so that's.
But I don't think it's just about the story too. I think it's, yes, of course, it's questioning the story, but it's more so, am I the type of person? Did I write the wrong story? So this thing that I've been living
questions the character.
Questions your identity.
Yeah.
And maybe you were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's a different story that can help you.
Right.
But it's like, yes, it's about the story, but it's not about the story. It's about you. It's about the character
Right. Well, I'm
in
saying,
that.
yes, you've been making this thing about the character, and that's what I'm saying. It's the character is the center of the whole
What
story.
does that say about me?
Right.
If I develop this character in a way that's maybe not as good. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what it comes down to. What does this say about you?
Well, and good is like, well, if you've deemed going crazy every day in the gym good, then yes, this is less than good.
Right. But that also goes into it, and we were kind of talking today, you can observe actions, and as a coach, that's what we do. Mm-hmm. We observe actions. We don't know thoughts. We don't know emotions.
Right.
We can, by observing people, kind of extract a couple things and pull a couple things, and, you know, there's people far more skilled than us at doing it, and we learn from them all the time, but we're pretty good also at having it just with experience and this and that. So we observe people. We observe people play out their stories. Mm-hmm. That's like just the flow of life. And so it's an interesting thing when you look at it from a coach's perspective. If we're saying, hey, you know, do this set of activities and behaviors that are beneficial for health and wellness.
Yep.
And we see an action or a series of actions or a way of being that doesn't really align with that. Very rarely is it because there's a outward either distrust or disagreement with
what we're suggesting.
Yeah. And I don't know numbers, but I would venture to say 9 times out of 10, it is because what we are saying is in direct conflict with a story that an individual tells themselves about what they're going to do.
Right.
That's right back to you, head down, blinders on, horse blinders on, going and doing my thing. Because I'm the type of person that does this. And look, is it every single time when it says black and white? No.
Yeah.
But when we look at people that can't change themselves or change their behavior, or maybe onboard things that they probably know would be good for them, they probably want to, it's because their story at
Well, it's
the
very
emotional
powerful.
level
Yeah.
as well,
Right.
it isn't it's tied to your identity, and it's like, but I'm a type of person that does this.
Right.
This is the role, this is the influence on the other characters, like this is who I
Right,
am.
and then when you start to, if you do say, I'm going to consider that maybe I'm not that person, it unravels a lot. And I don't think that I think people are very afraid of starting to pull that string.
Well, because the question's then who are you?
Right,
And that
and what
is
about this, and what about that? You know, so to bring it back to something tangible, so we do have people in our lives, whatever it is, members, clients, who, and again, all these things I think we identify and we can speak to, like, personally as well,
Yeah.
who lead highly stressed lives.
Yes.
Like, and maybe I'll just take myself as an example. I probably won't be the kind of person that is ever considered, like, you know, is just going to do one thing a day, like super low key. Like, that part of it is sure, like, everybody has their nature. But identifying at what point that becomes just, like, destructive. And so there's a group of people that when we watch how they play out and what they're doing, as you said, we see that behavior is just so destructive. Their story that they've created for themselves is really causing problems.
Yeah.
The challenge becomes when they maybe would like our help.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to rewrite that, to take a look even at the story.
It's a
and
challenge.
then it becomes like, and I think you and I are at a place now where, like, we don't feel, I think maybe people early in their career, people maybe that aren't as confident or whatever the reason is, they feel the need to yield or maybe bend or work with the person, meet them where they're at. And I understand meeting people where they're at, but we're not going to.
There's a difference between having empathy and enabling someone,
right,
or meeting someone where they're at and be like, okay, this is where you're at. I'll work with you, or then just saying, like, I'm just gonna enable you.
Yeah.
'Cause,
well, and the thing is, for fitness and nutrition, like, and that's one of the things we've said, like, it is much more marketable, sellable to what you're really doing is giving people, yielding to their story of whatever they need, and that's easier, and you collect the money, and what's the harm in it? And sure, if that person wants to run today, fine, let's just, like, we'll do sprints, or if you want a diet, okay, I'll give you the numbers. We're at a place where, like, I think there's an integrity problem there that we can't just do that, so we're going to. But that does require more than just numbers and data, as we're saying. It's not just about, here's the program, here's the protocol. It's the first step is you got to look at if your story is, like, really, like, the thing holding you back. Not the diet, not the fitness routine, you. And that's big. That's, like, a huge piece. And that's something I think for me, like, I did have to do. I'm very much about, is this the right workout? Will this produce this? What about this? And it's like looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
That pattern, that desire to, like, if I just fix this, if I just get the workouts right or the diet right, like, that's what will have, you know, success, and the wrong thing. So I think that's what I was trying to get at with the conflict.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to, and I think that's just something people, you can't force someone into that. You can suggest that they take a look at it.
Right.
Some people are willing to, and some people are not, and maybe at some point they'll be ready to, but we're not going to be the person to force them.
No, absolutely not. Because, one, it's not your story. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, really, that's it. It's not your story. I think when we switch gears a little bit away from, like, maybe the individual consuming their own story or writing their own story to interacting with others, if you pause and you think about what's this person's story, again, not in a judgmental way or anything like that, but in a curious way, if you understand fundamentally, you have no idea what story they're writing.
Right.
You don't know if they want to write it. You don't know the other characters. You don't know a damn thing. You literally, I mean, yeah, of course, you go and you judge it by its cover.
Sure. And also what people maybe tell you, but that doesn't
Yeah,
mean
people,
anything.
nobody knows anything. Nobody knows a damn thing, honestly, about anyone else. So if you were to think about, you know, if there's, and I think where to make this more tangible, somebody at work is pissing you off.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. They're an asshole.
In our case, that would be you.
What?
Well, like we work together, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been very, very nice with your influence on the podcast, okay? So I haven't said nearly as much as I could say.
Okay, so we're at work. You're pissing me off.
So we're at work. I'm pissing you off.
Mm-hmm.
You're obviously doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. End of story. You're at work. Someone's pissing you off. And it is very, very easy. And it feels good at the time to just know, to think that you know everything about that person.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the villain. You're the victim.
Mm-hmm.
They're whatever. You think you know their story. But if you were to really stop and be like, I wonder what this person's story is. Like, and zoom out 100,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And consider, I wonder if there's other characters in this story, in this book, that I don't know of, that's having an influence on this particular character. We've all, hopefully, we've all read books. We all watched movies. We all see how other characters influence character behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that. But if we stop and think about it, I think it can help improve empathy with others, and it can also help with your own relationship with it and interaction with this character, where
Right, realizing nothing's in isolation.
nothing's in
You're not just
isolation.
dealing with
You
you
don't
and them.
know. You have no idea. I mean, I think it's so amazing, like, what people deal with that you have no idea about. And then, and I've been there before. Like, I've had, you know, shitty days and strings of just not good. And it's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, if I'm in an interaction or someone catches me at that point, and I'm just kind of like, I'm just tired of it, or I'm just fed up or whatever,
Yeah.
it can obviously then be like, oh wow, Bill, like, you know, he's an asshole or something. And then it's like, yeah, and you have no idea what the past 12 hours, days, weeks, months have been like.
Sure.
And again, it's not saying like, you know, oh, well, just whatever, that's fine, and that's that person, but because it's not about your story necessarily. It's about theirs. And one of the things that you have to look at is like how is that character also then going to influence yours? And when we just get really angry, I often think it's also, and angry more in terms of like how it's going to be toxic to you and consume you. I also think it's something that you look at and you're like, I have no other option. You have no other option. And it's just, nothing's going to change and this and that. But empathy really does blow the doors off of that and be like, and then it's like, man, I feel bad for this person. You understand them a little bit. You have a little bit more compassion. It's not to say that if their actions are awful, you're going to like excuse it or you're going to agree with it. But you just understand it a little bit more. So thinking about not just your own story, but others that are challenging, you know, what's going on with them. And if you think you know, you're wrong. You don't know what their story is. Just like how many of us don't even know what ours is.
Right. Well, and that's not to bring it back to the individual, but I think beyond just the fitness stuff, like there is quite a bit of just, for a lot of people, having a huge revelation when they realize maybe some of their beliefs are made up and it's their story. I'm someone that I'm not good at this. I'm not good at sport. Like, you know, for some people it's an experience they had when they were younger or something somebody said, and then that becomes this reality. And it's like all this time you've been telling yourself this story about who you are, and you can rewrite it at any time. And that's a very powerful thing. But for some people, it's taking a look at like, what have I been telling myself that's just made up?
Well, yeah.
And so that's a really interesting thing. And it sounds very easy, but like you said, perception's reality. So everything I believe feels real because it's what I believe. But like, if I believe for me, one of the things was like, I always felt unathletic. And we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from whatever. Like when I did gymnastics, I stopped gymnastics, had never kicked a soccer ball, like didn't make it on the community team. Then fast forward, we meet, you're very athletic. Like comparatively, I just didn't feel as athletic. I don't have some of those movement patterns. Like it just perpetuated this thing of me saying like, I am not an athlete. Like I don't feel like an athlete. Competing at CrossFit, I felt like I was an imposter there. Like, how did I get here? I'm not athletic at all. And so it's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, is that a fact that I'm unathletic? Like, or am I just telling myself that that's a story that I've just believed for however long? And how does that hold me back? But if you'd asked me maybe 10 years ago, it just would have been like, yeah, that's just a fact. Mm-hmm. I'm unathletic, period. So I think it can take a while to really uncover like what are things that you've kind of made up for yourself and really believed and taken on as fact that are just not.
Yeah, and the confines of the story are very comfortable because it's like, look, I'm not an athlete. So then you seek to find validation of that. I didn't get on the community soccer team. Yeah. I blah, 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 and you insert all this stuff. And it's like, okay, like, good, fine. I'll just kind of assume that label, and that'll be the character, and that's what it is.
Right. It's back to one of your other podcasts. What are you looking for? And any of those things, I'm unlovable. People don't like me.
Yeah.
You're going to find all of those things because that's part of the brain is to kind of prove you right. It doesn't like surprises. It doesn't want to be proven wrong. So you will create scenarios to prove yourself right. And it's like when you realize that it's a self-licking ice cream cone, as you say, it's like, oh shit, like I've not only been I'm kind of creating my own reality.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a big one.
And that's when we look at I think it's interesting to look at actions and just ask like, what story am I saying about myself through this?
Right.
And again, the key I think with it is being curious and compassionate, not judgmental or critical or anything like that, and just examine it, just see what you see. I put up a post last week that kind of caught fire with some people about suffer in silence, and the post said suffer in silence is bullshit, and wrote about it, and that would be super easy to judge. And had a little bit of a back and forth with the guy. And what was nice is at first I was like, what is this? Like somebody like read the post, think for yourself, and then we can have the conversation. And what the exchange that wound up happening was actually really nice, which was cool because I was expecting it to just be like, well, I wasn't looking to get into like some sort of stupid internet debate. Anyway. That suffer in silence quote is a storyline in a specific type of story with a specific kind of character in a specific part of the story. The problem is that is played out throughout the duration and comes to be, this is what someone like this does.
Like the warrior thing.
Like the warrior thing, like the, elite special operations people, like some badass, some like stoicism is great and all. Stoicism doesn't mean void of emotion.
Right.
But what was interesting about that was people really, I think, understood how, if I apply that to all elements, that comes with a very, very limiting and toxic cost. Like it costs you a lot to just put on this suffer and silence thing.
Sure.
This is maybe a judgment, but it's also like, let's not disrespect the word suffer either. Because I've seen, and in the fitness, like I've seen that a lot. Like people like, oh, suffering in workouts. Like I'm trying not to swear, but I'm really having a hard time with this one. You're not suffering. So like, don't disrespect frankly.
Sure, you're talking about a much bigger thing that's more life. We're not talking about physical discomfort. You're talking about like
No, like truly
changing,
suffering. Like, yeah, sure, you
like
can. Yeah,
actual suffering.
I
Like,
suffered
like
and this and that. Like, and I get it. And I don't want to sound too. I don't know. I don't want to sound too like
yeah,
semantic
the
driven
point,
or whatever.
though,
I'm
of
just
your
trying to
things-
raise the awareness of the language we use and the intention behind why we use it. And when it comes to something like suffer in silence, people look at a certain character that they want to emulate and be like in many cases. And they look at that and they say that person suffers in silence. Or like, yeah, suffer in silence. And it's a badge of honor. Just like it's like saying people that blast themselves in the gym every day are this. And it's like...
Right, and then that weaves into that story.
No,
and it's...
yeah. So...
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I wanted to go with it.
Yeah, I think what's kind of cool about some of the stuff we're doing and the movements things, and it's actually what like initially drew me. I guess one of the things that drew me to CrossFit in the early days was this chance to just like express who I was or do things that weren't restricted to that story I told myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I do, while I know we don't love that, there's some problems, I guess, and pitfalls with everyone calling themselves an athlete because of that character.
Oh boy.
But I think there's also like, it's really amazing to have someone physically do something like, no, I can't do this. It's too hard. I can't. Like picking up a sandbag, let's just say. Like you can. And like for that person doing that thing, that like their story is like, no, I'm too weak. I'm weak. I'm not strong enough. And then they do it. That's so much more powerful than me just telling that person like, no, you're strong enough. And that's where some of the stuff is really incredible. Now that doesn't apply to everything and every story we're talking about, but just to sort of, there are opportunities to have that be, to have movement be an expression of like who you are, because and not be just about...
Yeah, I mean, that's been a big thing.
Prisons, yeah.
And we've been doing a lot of work, and I have a few clients now, and that's what we're working on, is really writing the story through and having movement be the form of expression with it. And, it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I have experienced. I think that's what you've experienced. I know that's what my clients are experiencing. Like, this isn't just like, okay, put it on paper and, and it's done. You really have to kind of dig in. And it's not going to be a guarantee that it works one time or quickly. But you see the alternative of not even considering it. And I agree with the movement stuff where we can connect so much to movement and, in fact, be not even going into, like, the physiological adaptations that occur.
Right.
But from just a personal engagement with your own existence, when we look at how we can attach important, fundamental personal development things to movement, it also is really, really liberating in terms of what you can and cannot do. And especially within CrossFit, because a lot of the people that we work with are within the CrossFit thing. And it's like, yeah, but I'm a CrossFitter. I do this. And it's like, right, that's that character.
Right. That's the character.
And CrossFitters don't do bicep curls because we're into, and then they insert the story, the whatever. And it's like,
well, the other thing that I think is necessary to say is, and I'm just going to say it, is looking at, as you said, with the suffer in silence, people look up to certain characters. So there are characters in the CrossFit space that people look up to. Right. Maybe they're a games athlete. Maybe they're...
all games athletes.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. No one looks at a normal, average person at a CrossFit
I'm talking
gym.
about like maybe a games athlete. Maybe they're a high-level coach that's in the on the level 1 staff that people know.
Yeah.
And so if that person, and so talking about what other people, you have no idea what that person's story is. Mm-hmm. And what they've got going on and what story they're telling themselves. Yeah. And now you have people looking at them, looking at what they're saying. And if they're saying suffer in silence, I'm not saying that, but their version of it with CrossFit. So go hard, kill yourself every day. That's what you have to do. There's a lot of people that, okay, that's what I have to do. That's the identity I have to assume too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's really dangerous, where people latch onto other people's stories and identities and characters, like you said, because that's who I am, and that's not. And one of the things we're trying to communicate is, each person that walks through that door is completely different from the other. And not only that, I'm different today than I was yesterday and tomorrow. So there isn't that like, just follow this. Just every day it's like repeat, story on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at like, well, who am I identifying with? Like, what's the character that I'm like latching onto? Because if it's not you, like, who the hell is it?
Exactly. And I think that people can, I forget, years ago, Joe Rogan had a sound clip about like, if you're the hero in your own story,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do?
Yeah.
And and it's a common thing. Jordan Peterson talks about it. Everybody, like, it's an important thing. It's a common thing. Trying to live someone else's story that they're writing for you is living a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understand why, though, it's so easy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay,
all I have to do is this.
All I have to do is this. And it offers you that, here, I've got you.
Yeah.
A little bit of
follow
comfort.
This plan,
It's mindless, essentially. All you have to do is what I tell you to do.
Right.
And it's like, I think a lot of people, and I'll just speak for me, I was burnt out on CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching level 1s. I was observing things that I was like, well, I don't really think that, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
the things you didn't agree with.
There's some things I didn't agree with. There were some people, frankly, that I just was like, oh, so that's how it's going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And that led to a burnout. And the unfortunate thing is, I love CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
I think CrossFit's great. CrossFit changed my life.
Yeah.
And I think I can empathize with people who feel that they are burned out.
Mm-hmm.
But the thought of questioning something that they do love.
Yeah, and something that has been important.
And has been important, and they have friends with,
yeah.
and all of these things. Like, I get
tough.
it, man. That is really, really tough.
Yeah, I mean.
But it's also one of those things, like, let's just have when I was in the Army, we would have an air it out meeting every now and then. And not always great. And it's like, leave your rank at the door, step in. What happens in the room stays in the room.
Mm-hmm.
What do we got? Like, no pulling punches, none of that. We have to have that with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have an air it out meeting sometimes and be like, do you even enjoy this anymore?
Right.
Do you like this? Why do you do this?
Sure. Well, and I'll use the word that Marcus used about cross country. You forced me into an aired out meeting at one point. I feel like you pushed me into the aired out.
What did I do?
With like some of the cross, and it was like, because I think for a long time that was a very scary thing. I mean, CrossFit, starting a CrossFit gym, also like that character, who I was. What's interesting about that is at the time I didn't associate it with, like, maybe now because of social media and things, it's a little harder to identify. But for me, opening that gym was like such a big thing about who I was, like a real thing, not
rightfully so.
Yeah, not like a story. Like, it was an expression of who I was, to be a leader, to do something like that, to open the gym.
Yeah. At a time.
Yeah, at a time where it wasn't the thing, it wasn't popular. It was just because I really believed in it.
Yeah.
And that's something I do feel like that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So then when it comes to like, because CrossFit was involved in that, I opened a CrossFit gym.
Yes.
Questioning CrossFit is like, oh my God, but is that now questioning me and who I am? But yeah, like having that, like, okay, you do need to just answer some of these questions for yourself. You don't have to talk to other people. You don't have to write it down and share it with anybody, but just like at some point you have to ask the questions to yourself, as you're saying. And I think I'm kind of kidding, but yeah, I mean, there are people in your life that can nudge you to do that. And I think that's what it was. It's like, hey, just take some time to think about this, not just have it be defensive. Because the first step is defensive. Like, no. Like,
Well,
what are you talking about? Because it can be kind of jarring at first.
Yeah.
So
it can be super jarring. And I think that that's part of, to your credit, you were open to it eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
And, I could have probably, in some ways, been a bit less direct. But sometimes, yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth because sometimes it's like,
well, sometimes if it's not direct, it's just not getting through. So
right,
that's
but the problem,
challenge.
the risk with that is if it's direct at the wrong time, it's a miss.
Right.
And then it's just like closed off defensiveness.
Yeah.
I don't care what, and we see that with change all the time.
Yeah.
It's like the change is good for you. It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter though. It's about the fact, it's
how.
about the delta,
It's the how.
and that's what it is.
Yeah.
The change is the enemy, not like where it's going. So I think that for people to have that air it out meeting, to look at what they're doing in and outside the gym, but like, and then really think about their story and their character development. And, that's not even, so what are you going to write? What is the story that you're going to write? What are some of the characters that need to go? And that's a big one.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, how does that kind of look?
Yeah.
Because man, that's like a major one.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy because some of that stuff, even it's the comfort of not changing the story, but that's actually more painful than what's possible if you do change the story.
Yeah.
So for me, like, it was scary to think about changing that story, but now what's on the other side is like, oh my God, this is, I don't want to say like better, but I have so much more enjoyment and joy, and like, so of course it's a little bit daunting, but asking those questions, you might actually find something that is good. So,
yeah.
I think there's a lot in there.
I think
but
so.
For sure, just taking a look at that notion of whether it's in the gym, whether it's outside the gym, your own story, what's actually maybe potentially something you've created versus reality, and then considering other people's, where they're coming from.
Yeah. All right. I think this is okay. This was a pretty good podcast. This was a good episode. A little bit, sometimes it is definitely ethereal, like you said, but I thought you did a good job of trying to
bring it back down.
Bring it back down. Yeah.
But
we had an interesting dinner chat when I was out in San Diego, and I don't think I told you about this. No, I didn't. And so we were talking, the notion of like TED Talks came up. And so we were like, okay, so the question that we all went around and talked about was, what would your TED Talk be? And it was cool.
What was yours?
I'm not telling you.
Okay, well that was a good story. Thank you.
It's too much. It's too much to get
maybe
into
for the
right
next
now.
one. Next podcast.
Let's just say
TED
Ted called, and I will not.
And he
be
wants
giving
to talk back.
He wants to talk. He said, "Listen, please don't." Yeah, I mean, look, it was a lot of this related to this stuff. It was a lot of on the emotional side of things and how we interact with the world, and more of our learning and development, and what we and I are kind of working with people on with amazing results. And that's the other thing. It's just like, it might sound crazy. I don't care.
Yeah, it works.
Because the life-changing results that people are having because they're open and they're doing it.
Sure.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
Not whether some idiot on, the internet says you should do it or don't do it, and but man. So anyway, it was cool. So maybe you can think about that too. Like, if you were to give a TED Talk, what would it be?
Yeah.
You've got 20 minutes, go.
I will.
All right, cool. So what do we have coming up? We've got a seminar.
Yep.
February 8th. There's, I think, 4 spots left. 4 or 5. I forget what the numbers were. I think it was no more than 10. So maybe there's 6 spots left. So that will be very cool.
Yeah, and just the seminar, to provide some context of what that is. It's like lectures, not lectures, but like you describing some tools and some concepts
Yeah.
of this stuff, and then some movement. So it's a combination of kind of move talk,
Yeah.
which is nice because people get to experience the movement part and then the conceptual stuff. And
Yeah.
it's more than just like 1 hour and then you're like sent off into the world. You get some time.
It won't be like any other. It won't be like any event, like overnight stuff or anything like
so
that.
So it's probably a great place for people that are curious about between the ears, maybe a little intimidated to come and realize like, oh, this is what it's about.
This is what it's about.
And also for people that have been doing between the ears who can like have a little bit of concrete, like the conceptual stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be, really, really cool.
I've been doing my women's thing,
yeah,
and it's been really good.
Yeah.
So I'm probably gonna do another one starting in April maybe.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Or the summer, June, and that's also like a 10-person max. We have 9 on this, and it's the right number.
9, 10.
I have 9 people in this one, and I wouldn't do more than 10.
No, you can't.
And it's been someone actually said, so it's kind of like a women's like between the ears, and I was like, yes, it's kind of like that. So
yeah,
it's cool. It's obviously the workouts once a week.
In person though.
In person,
which is awesome.
We do it together, and I coach them, which
Yep.
is big.
Yep.
There's a concept that kind of relates to that week,
Yeah.
and mostly that women can relate to. I think. I mean, not that anybody can't, but maybe a little more towards the women specific stuff.
Sure.
And then we have a call a week.
Yeah.
Which is cool because it kind of gives people, that's a little more of a chance to like, so what do we got? What do
You
we...
have one call a week?
Yeah.
Oh really? Show me up. Maybe I should do more calls.
Well, it's only a 6-week program.
That's true.
So anyway, I'll probably do another one of those, and I'm going to go out there and say that before the end of this year, we're going to do some sort of actual weekend thing. Maybe it's...
What do you mean we?
Well, we've talked about like...
You and me?
Yeah, maybe it's you and me. Well, you and me. Whether it's which category it falls into is up for
What are you saying?
debate.
Are you saying we're going to do an event? Or...
Well, I don't know. It might fall into the become category
Mm-hmm.
of like just more of an experience kind of weekend, like we've talked about. Or I've had women asking if I'm doing another women's retreat.
Oh, okay.
But it would be cool. We've talked about a couples thing.
I have had people asking too, when's the next between the ears?
So we had talked about doing kind of a between the ears retreat. Yeah. So probably in the fall.
I'm just going to say it. And
are you going to say something about our dogs that are eating our door upstairs? Okay.
Yeah, I think between the ears might just be misleading. Even though I'm trying to have it not be like, I'm not going to beat anyone up or anything.
Sure.
But
that's why I think if someone's curious, the seminar's so good.
Yeah.
And the weekends are incredible. And it's not about...
Yeah.
I think for us, like the weekend, whatever it is, whatever you and I label it as, it's an opportunity either way for people to have an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Even on the Between the Ears weekend, there was amazing food.
Yeah, it was.
Like really good coffee. Like the place they stayed at was beautiful. So those elements are always there, and that in itself is
but the biggest thing too is the environment's major, but the damn connection with people.
Yeah, and that's why it's a small thing.
Yeah.
And if Christina Previt's listening, she's going to suggest Norway again. We're not going to Norway.
Oh my God. Yes.
I'm going to Norway for a wedding. We are not doing a retreat to Norway this year. Not this year.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because the practice is at, I think there's maybe 10 or 11 people in this group, and it's great. Mm-hmm. Really diverse. Mm-hmm. So we have... Is somebody out in California doing it? Yeah, I think so. Probably one, like a West Coast. I'm sorry if you're listening and I forget where everyone is. My brain's mush. But
yeah, you have everything from
we've got everything
Middle East to...
Well, we've got, further than that, we've got West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we've got somebody currently in the Middle East. All the way out to China.
Space. Oh. Okay, China.
So and a bunch of places in between.
Yeah. Cool.
And it's really, really cool. And I said I was only doing one practice group.
TBD.
TBD. We'll have to see some
Yeah.
of the things, some of the other
And
things
we
we
are
got.
not announcing it, but we have a really big thing happening this
We
year.
do.
But we're
Yeah.
not going to announce it
It's
yet.
not. It's not a baby.
It is
So
not a
just-
baby. No, I'm
That is.
No.
That's not happening ever.
kind of a baby, but not a human baby. Not a dog baby. Like a baby in a
Do not say it's a
in a
baby.
way. It's not a baby. But it's very big, and maybe in the next 2.
Yeah.
So if you're
Yeah, we'll see.
curious and you didn't want to listen, make sure you do listen to the next ones, because maybe we'll
I don't
announce
think
it
anyone's
in this
listening anymore. I think
Okay,
they
we're
really
past
kinda-
an hour.
Alrighty, we'll see you guys next week.
No Q&As.
Oh yeah, hold on. We're back. False, fake pump.
When
I
you
don't think
post, did anybody
Listen,
ask
no one's
questions?
gonna ask a question. I put up a thing about Q&A on
You
Instagram.
put it up 5 minutes before our thing.
Well, that's kind of the point.
Okay, but here's
Um,
the thing. If we put one up before the next one, if you do have questions...
If you have questions, send them. If
Yeah,
there's something
send
you
them.
want us to talk about, send them.
Yeah, that would
Not
be
to
good.
say we're gonna know what the hell we're talking about, but just to involve you guys a little
Yeah.
bit more. Yeah, no questions right now. There's one question. Why is Kay so mean to Bill? Oh well, that's yeah.
Goodbye.
Alrighty, bye bye.